Several years ago, I was going to do a class up in Paradise, and I wanted to do it based on the Bill Moyers and Joseph Campbell PBS special that was on. It was a series, and it was called The Power of Myth. And I believe, I've been looking at it this week, and I believe it came out in 1988. Really powerful, really. I mean, Joseph Campbell was just such a gift, you know. He was Joseph Campbell is interesting. He was an academic, but to me, he seemed to be really a mystic too. He just had a way of touching spiritual meaning in such an intuitive way. And he was one of those rare academics who could be in both worlds. And I admired him so much and his work so much. So. The Center for Spiritual Living in Paradise had the DVD set of the series, and so what I would do is I would go in kind of like middle of the afternoon, and I would watch one of the discs to kind of get me ready for class a little bit later, and what parts we would pick and what we would talk about. And so this one day, I went into the center and I got there in the middle of the afternoon. I was there completely alone, and I got into the system we had, the projection system and sound system, the booth, got in there, put the DVD on and got it ready, and I came out. And we had a remote control, which was cool, so I could point it kind of at the booth. And so I'm sitting there, I'm just sitting like on the front row, chair similar to these, and I just hit it. And all of a sudden it comes up, and so I'm watching it. And there was this image of the caves in France where the cave paintings are. And so I'm there all alone in the center, and I've got all the lights off, but that center had lots of windows in it, and so there was all kinds of light coming in. I think it was kind of a cloudy day, so the light was kind of interesting. The projection system on this disc was a little bit on the grainy side, but anyway, I was just sitting there. And I'm watching this, and they're just panning this. And I was reading about it this week, and these came from what's called the Late Stone Age, 177,000 years ago. And there are 600 individual paintings on these walls and ceilings. And I sat there looking at this, and of course, however it was filmed was somewhat shadowy, because when you get down in those caves, there's like zero light. There's no light down there. And I just sat there, and I was so mesmerized, and I felt something in my heart. This incredible deep connection with all these animals, because that's mainly what it is. It's the fauna of that particular time, and anthropologists and archaeologists have confirmed that, because some of these animals haven't been in Europe forever, obviously not forever, and they were just these wonderful, large, bison-y, buffalo, horse, rhinoceros-looking animals, and I sat there for a moment, and Joseph Campbell's point to the whole thing was, he said, this is one of the earliest ideas of what he would call a cathedral. He talked about the power of looking up at something. And he said, imagine the great cathedrals of Europe and places where you go in and the architecture takes you up. And back in those days, we've had electricity this much of our history. We haven't had electricity. And so you would go in there, you're a farmer, you're, whatever you are, you work hard, you only live till about 35, you're trying to make a family, and so you walk into a cathedral on Sunday, and these, stained glass has been invented, and all of a sudden you see the sun come down through, and maybe you even walk in a beam that's red or blue or something, and your gaze is taken up. And Joseph Campbell said that the caves in France, imagine, first of all, there's a couple of ideas there. First of all, they were led from their hearts to painted them probably over a few generations. And then he said that we think, because we don't know for sure, we think that they would go in there periodically, different times a year, and they would have these big bonfires, and they would dance in front of them, and they would, some form of prayer, some form of ritual, some form of whatever. This inspiration. And Joseph Campbell said that this is the where this lives within our spiritual practice is the idea that we look at something grand and great. We look at something that brings our gaze up and, up like this, but then somehow touches our hearts. There is that connection. The grandeur and the individual, that we are connected. That's the psychology of it. And Joseph Campbell would argue that idea, so I had to read this twice. 177,000 years ago, our ancestors had figured this out in terms of being part of something that is grand but personal. The larger and that part that touches us. And so I'm sitting in the Center for Spiritual Living in Paradise in front of a big screen, all by myself, nobody else there. I'm watching this grainy image. And I had the remote control, and I just kept rewind, go, rewind, go, rewind, go, rewind, go. I just couldn't, I just was like, oh my God. And I started to cry. I felt emotional of this grainy image. After a while, I wasn't even listening to these guys talking. I'm just watching this. In our philosophy, in metaphysics, New Thought philosophy, and this didn't originate with us. It originates in some of the earliest ideas when spirituality started to kind of come into the roots of what we would call religion or philosophy or ideas, is an idea with two simple words. I am. Tiny words. One word's a one letter word, and then you got a two-letter word. I am. And what Joseph Campbell basically was saying, because Joseph Campbell, as much as we can know about his own personal beliefs, was what we would call probably, a metaphysician in terms of his own ideas, seeing truth in all kinds of expressions. And now this is going to be strange in how I put this. The spiritual necessity of practice. The spiritual necessity of practice. Ritual. Something outside of ourselves that charges us in this way. Because the question is, all those thousands of years ago, in the very end of the Stone Age, our ancestors had to go in there once in a while to get recharged. Because for some reason, on this earthly plane, and this has been around for a long time, we tend to lose sight of it. We read something inspirational, we listen to someone inspirational, we listen to music, we listen to whatever we do a ritual. We go out, we start living our lives. God is all there is. I am. I'm going to talk about the I am statement here for a moment. I am meaning, here's the largest expression. I am connected to it. I'm part of it. I'm not separate from it. And yet we lose it. We lose it because we get a diagnosis. Or we lose it because, there's a job situation. Or we lose it because a relationship is getting kind of rocky. Or we have a money situation. And we forget for a moment. There's a lot of people that, there's a lot of speculation. So the anthropologists and archaeologists will say, well, these people came down and they worshiped these animals. These were the herd animals that they were hunting at the time. And Joseph Campbell said he believes it's more of a connection. In other words, these animals, some of them embodied such a powerful image. And it was like, these are my brothers and sisters. I'm part of them. And whatever power I see within them, I see within myself. Joseph Campbell talks about the idea that this is transformational in terms of it's something that at one level, at one level we know, but we have a hard time hanging on to. Charles Fillmore of the Unity philosophy, which is one of our metaphysical sisters, says the I Am speaks to a spiritual identity, the metaphysical name of spirit, our spiritual identity. Listen to this again. The metaphysical name of spirit / our spiritual identity. If we had a magic wand, for all you Harry Potter fans, what we believe in metaphysics is, our magic wand is, I am. Okay? Now, if you think that that's airy-fairy, I have been working with people for 30 some odd years. And I've been working in some very interesting places, correctional places, places that deal with addiction, been through my own journeys. And one of the things that we talk about when you work with people who have very challenging lives around criminality or addiction or whatever, is you get into this idea of what we call core issues or personal beliefs. So let me ask you a question. What is it like for someone to spend years with a core belief of not being enough? Can you imagine how many times in a person's head the I am statement is, I am not enough? And now we look at the outlook. We look at what happened. We look at the dis-ease part of it. And I'm not just talking about medical stuff. I have sat in rooms with people and made loving, affirmative statements to who I believe they are. And they'll fight me on that. I think you're one of the most loving, wonderful people I've ever met. You're an inspiration to me. Now, you don't know me, man. That's BS, as in belief system, but anyway. Now, they'll fight you. Wow. We will fight to make sure, I'm dark, I'm negative, I'm the broken toy. Do you understand that? Wow. The belief system is so ingrained from things like abuse, abandonment, all those kinds of things. We see the power of the I am statement in there. Because the idea is that the magic wand that Harry Potter has can be used for a good outcome or a bad outcome. Because it's the power of spirit. The power of spirit. The power of spirit is there in the I am statements for whatever we want to do with it. We've all heard this where psychology says, even secular psychology is into this, right? It says human beings are not afraid of how weak we are. We're afraid of how powerful we are. And I have worked in the presence of all kinds of powers. I've seen beautiful light of power, and I've seen some darkness of power. I've seen healing and I've seen despair. And very often what's behind it is some form of an I am statement that comes forward as a belief. So Joseph Campbell says, in order to remember what Charles Fillmore said, we have to be inspired. Because this is the bottom line. And, I don't have an answer to this. I have no idea. I mean, someday, someday when I pass over, if there is a wonderful old woman on top of a mountaintop and she's got all the answers, I'm going. And I'm going to ask her this one question. Why do you suppose it is that we forget who we are in this earthly life so much? And I believe what she's going to say is because the energies of the earthly journey are heavy, intense, and tactile. And I'm going to ask her, well, why did you set it up that way? And she's going to say, well, first of all, I didn't, you did. And the answer to that is because how else are we going to learn? Lama Surya Das, who's a Buddhist writer who I have a lot of respect for, he's asked a question all the time because Buddhism believes in reincarnation. I'm not here to tell you to believe in reincarnation. We all have to figure that out for ourselves. But they say, well, okay, if we reincarnate, how come we don't carry all the past lives with us and know what they are? And Surya Das says, how would we learn? How would we evolve? And what Surya Das says is there's something, we do carry it, but it's at a deep, unconscious, spiritual level. As Ernest Holmes would say, when we leave this world, what we take with us is a stream of consciousness. So what are we talking about there? That's where we talk about the belief systems. That's where we talk about the mental atmosphere of who we are. So I want to share something with you, a story that hopefully makes this very tangible. And I can see I'm already running late on time. I apologize for this, but I'll get us there, I promise. Okay. At Center for Spiritual Living in Paradise, our platform was in the front of the room, and there was a skylight above it, and the ceiling was kind of tapered back. I don't know, it was a very interesting construction. I don't know what it was because that was long before I ever got there. There's a skylight right in the middle. Came down into the middle of the platform. And so we had a singing bowl, a big glass bowl we used to start the service with. We'd bong it, 3 times, and people would settle down and stuff. And so it sat right below that skylight. Now, one year we were aligning ourselves in a celebration for the 1,000 cranes of origami, if you're familiar with that. And we were kind of stepping into this idea of the whole healing of cancer and the 1,000 cranes and all that stuff. And so we came up with a piece that hung down from the skylight. So, Maisie, why don't you kill these lights, and if you can put it up here. Thank you, I appreciate it. Okay. Anyway, just imagine this, okay? So anyway, all these cranes were coming down. They were around the skylight, and they hung down, and they were all different colors. They were gorgeous, and members of the center folded them for a couple weeks. I folded like 2. That's all I could handle, right? I got big hands and stuff. So anyway, they were brought down on strings. Okay, so this one day, I had to do a memorial for someone. It was in the middle of the week. And so it was the display was only supposed to be up for about 2 weeks. People loved it. And it ended up being up there for 2 or 3 years. We had this. So it became the center of our stage. And I was doing a memorial where the family, a young adult had passed away. And it was under some challenging circumstances. And the family did not really like organized religion. They wanted it to be spiritual. They kind of heard about us, didn't know much about us. They were kind of sort of in our direction, but not quite. And there was going to be a lot of people there because it was a young adult, and the place was packed. And, so they wanted me to do this. And so I get in front of this crowd, and the way I approached it was uplifting and, celebration, and, that because that's what we believe. I know the circumstances of people leaving this world could be challenging, but, the meaning of life and what life represents and means, I know in my heart life is eternal, and it's no matter what the journey, that it's upward and onward. So I was trying to do that, but they had some speakers there who were just, people who, and some of them were dark. I mean, I don't know how else to put it. It's like, whoa, So I would go off to the side when they would speak. So anyway, I started watching the crowd. And what I noticed was that when one of these real dark speakers were speaking, so they're down there, and up behind them is the cranes with the light coming through. And I was watching the eyes of the people in the audience. They would watch the person for a while, then I'd watch their eyes go up and rest on those cranes. And I could see the softening in their face. What was that? I mean, we're not talking about the Sistine Chapel. We're not talking about the caves in France. We're talking in this little building under a skylight with the natural light coming down onto the singing bowl that was down below. And the softening of the face is this idea there is something more than what that guy is saying who's being so dark. Altars, let's call the cave paintings, let's call the cranes, let's call these elements that we bring into our life the reminders of our divinity. Because we need that. As human beings, we need the presence of something. We need the Buddha's confidence. We need the idea of the cranes carrying the soul. We need the idea of light and something larger to remind us of the I am statement. Ernest Holmes says about I am affirms our unity with spirit, period. I am affirms our unity with spirit. That's what those people saw in the cranes. That's what our ancestors saw in the cave paintings. That's what we need in our life. God, really quickly, I got this really fast. Okay, I was working with someone some years ago in addiction. Young woman, she'd been a three-sport athlete in high school, three-sport athlete in college. She was one of those A students, got degrees, had all kinds of resources to educate herself. She was a joy to everybody around her. And in her last year or so of college, she started to drink socially. And it grabbed a hold of her really fast. And it really took her down. So anyway, she came into treatment. And so we were talking about this idea of reclaiming who she really is. Because that's what the I am statement is. Reclaiming who she really is. So what she did was, she decided she was going to bring running back into her life, because for her spiritual practice as a high school student, as a college student, was to run. She loved her. It kept her in shape when she played soccer and all this other stuff, but she loved, when she was out there, she felt so connected. So she went down and bought herself a beautiful pair of Adidas running shoes. And she set them by the door of her apartment so that when she got home every day, those shoes were there. Those shoes reminded her of who and what she was. And she put the shoes on and she went for a run every day. And there were times, she told me, at work when she was down, she was distracted, she felt herself losing it, she thought about those shoes and what they meant to her. This idea of those shoes became the I am statement of who and what she is. All right. So I just want to leave you with, go out there and find your I am altar and build it and be around it and be inspired. Okay. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Namaste. All right. So,